Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Crivelli, and I'm here with Cara De La Rosa. Um, and today we're going to have a Q&A and hopefully share some information that might be of interest. We'll start by giving you a little bit of information about ourselves. So again, I'm Jill, and I have a 10-year-old Portuguese water dog that is slowly recovering from an injection of Librela. I'm also a licensed professional counselor, and I've been impacted by the immense amount of complicated grief that surrounds this situation and the multiple faces that it takes. And lastly, I have a PhD in counselor education. So I'm also really curious and have taken to sleuthing, trying to uncover why there's such a large knowledge gap that exists between affected pet owners and the many, many vet prescribers. So thank you for taking time, Cara, to chat today about this in hopes that we can offer some support to those that are struggling. So let's start by hearing about you and what your
Sure,
relationship is to this issue.
sure, absolutely. I am Cara Della Rosa. So I am a certified pet loss grief coach, supporting pet parents through anticipatory grief process and the grief process after loss. I'm also a certified animal hospice professional. So I serve pet parents in between the gap from receiving a diagnosis to figuring out the most humane time for transition, and all of the nuances in between there. And so, because of the population that I serve, I'm working with primarily older animals, senior animals, or animals with medical diagnoses, and helping pet parents navigate medication choices and medications at home. My personal experience is that because I've been working in this field for 13 years, and then been in and around the veterinary community for 15 years now, the veterinary community was very excited about these medications coming out this year, which is 2024, that they launched, which is the Librela for dogs and Solensia for cats. It's a nerve growth inhibitor specific for animals with osteoarthritis. And I have my own senior cat at home who's 16 and has osteoarthritis, and I was giving her the Solensia injections, which I recently have stopped. And so Jill reached out to me in looking for kind of specialty support around how do we support pet parents who are dealing with these devastating challenges coming up around Librela and this medication. And I think you really touched on an important point, Jill, around the gap in education, pet parent education. But where is that gap really starting from? And because from someone who was excited about the launch of a potential osteoarthritis medication and was told, hey, there are no side effects. This is virtually safe, 100% safe, no side effects. Well, as a pet parent, that's really exciting to hear. Like, yeah, why wouldn't I choose a medication that's going to help my animal that's uncomfortable and dealing with mobility issues if it's got no side effects? And so now that we are starting to see, with the Librela, thousands of pet parents being affected negatively by this, and hundreds of cat parents being affected by the Solensia, we are starting to see these side effects, and concerns and issues coming out. So I think this is an important conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm just going to suggest that I toss some scenarios to you and you just, share what your thoughts are and experiences, if that's okay. Um, so the first scenario, and I get these again, I'm involved in trying to support and understand and research and digest and, this grassroots community. And one of the scenarios that we see a lot, and people are really struggling and reaching out for support, oftentimes getting it from each other, is that they've given their pet the shot of Librela, and now they're watching their dog suffering, or their cat. Things like ataxia, where they lose control of their limbs, is a really common one. And they're trying to assess, what do I do? So they're watching their animal suffering, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And they're having a hard time getting support, because many of the veterinarians are still saying, oh, other than injection site soreness, there's no side effects. It can't be because of this. And so it's that sitting with suffering and not being able to find the right kind of support. And what are your thoughts about, that very complicated grief of sitting with suffering and feeling responsible not only for perhaps creating it, but also responsible for resolving it, and not being able to find a path forward that feels like it validates what your experience or seeing in your pet?
I think it's a horrendous position to be in. And I think that with situations like this, and what comes to mind is, the some of the food recalls we've seen where the food gets recalled because a number of animals have died from whatever toxic whatever has been in the food, right? And then the big corporations who put out the food have to make a public recall. A lot of like times it's a large public outcry that creates change within, or causes the corporation or big pharma to look at it and go, oh, well, look at, there's a large population of people that are having these side effects. Now we have to actually do something about it. And what are we going to do? And there's a gap in time between that happens, the public outcry, and we're getting attention, or there's a spotlight actually put on the issue. And in the meantime, pet parents are left suffering. I mean, it's heartbreaking, right? And so um really any scenario within this is a feeling of helplessness and not being validated, not being seen, not being heard. I mean, the number one step you would take if something was going wrong with your animals, take them into emergency, call your vet and tell them, hey, this happened immediately after the injection, or within this time frame after the injection. I've seen a major decline. We have to report it. We have to report the side effects, number one. And we have to hold the vet clinic accountable for reporting the side effects. So it's not just, unfortunately, I guess what I'm saying is it does fall back onto the pet parent to say, to tell and alert the vet, and then say, I need you to report these side effects to your contact at Big Pharma or your pharmaceutical rep. These side effects have to be reported, because a lot of times with certain reactions to medications, the pet parent might report the side effects, and then that's where it ends.
Yeah.
It ends with the vet who doesn't take it that step further. And I think we will start seeing more and more veterinary clinics taking a different stance on this medication as they start to have personal experience with the negative side effects. And so, as far as dealing with all of the big feelings that come up after something like this, first of all, it's a huge shock to your system. So your systems can see it as your system will kick into survival mode. What do I need to do to care for my animal? What do I need to do to help support my animal? And I don't know what the answer to that is in this case. I don't know if there's an antidote. I know that you can speak to your experience, and maybe this is an appropriate time. But certainly paying attention to what's going on in your body around the shock of this, seeking community where you can be seen and witnessed and validated is important. to be able to feel heard and get your voice out. So I know, like, the group that you're representing have come together to say, hey, me too, right? Me too. This is happening to me too. And this is what I've seen. And when we're able to speak that and be seen in community with other people that relate to that, it's very supportive. We need support when we're going through navigating something so scary. Um, and there's a whole host of feelings that will come up around this.
Yeah, and I hope that there's some veterinarians watching, this chat, because I can just share from personal experience how incredibly painful it is to be trying to do the best to figure out how to help your pet survive this, and watching them suffer and going in and seeking expert help and having things. I'll tell you, just in the last month, I've had vets, I've had a neurologist tell me, listen to my whole story and then write in the clinical note, pain experienced, injection site pain, instead of the incredible ataxia and loss of his limbs for weeks. So that's frustrating. Or I experienced, I believe there's a correlation, but not causal, with the Librela injection, because most dogs are senior that receive this. So oftentimes pet parents, there's this feeling that pet parents are blinded by their love for their pet and not objectively able to observe and describe what what their experience is with their pets. So there's kind of this invalidation of, you don't really know what you're seeing. That's really insult to injury. It really doubles the suffering, to not only be struggling, but then to be alone without an expert kind of validating or believing you or partnering with you.
That's maddening. That's maddening. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard. So
Mhm.
what about this scenario? And this is the one, all these scenarios take my breath away.
Mhm.
But this is the one that's just the really hardest one to sit with, I believe. And that is pet owners that gave their cat or dog in a Librela shot, and really and truly, they didn't give their animal a Librela shot. They were following expert advice, right? And allowed their animal to have a Librela shot. And their pet had side effects, sometimes ataxia, that can look pretty scary and bad. And they euthanized their animal, not knowing exactly what they were seeing and not having any hope that they could recover. And then later finding out all these stories of these exact symptoms happening and understanding that, oh, some animals actually can survive with supportive care, and the Librela, the cells that have been attacked by the Librela can be slowly replaced over time. And so individuals in this scenario are experiencing so much grief and guilt,
Mhm.
about this wrongful death that they feel they had a hand in.
Mhm.
Any thoughts about, that scenario? It's really just a heartbreaking situation.
I think that, again, with my work with loss, any loss registers to our body as a trauma. And this would certainly register in the category of traumatic loss. And so, uh, with many, many different scenarios around pet loss, we're always um, looking at the guilt pieces that come up within us. The I wish I could have, I wish I should have, if only I had known, if I had done this sooner, if I had waited longer, if I had, you know, um, it's very common with any kind of pet loss to deal with the guilt. And I imagine that in a scenario like this, where there's this piece of like, I could I could have waited longer. What if, there is this lingering what if, the unknown. and we can't go back. We can't go back and we can't change it, right? The ways in which to work with the guilt, and this is going to sound, trite in the face of what of this trauma, but feeling it, recognizing it, getting underneath it. Maybe there's pieces of anger that need to be expressed and validated. How could you not be angry, right, around a situation like this? And anger is an emotion that we often are not allowed to express, or don't feel comfortable expressing, or don't have the tools to express in a safe and healthy way. So there are tools to work with the anger that's in your body, to release the anger, to acknowledge it. um, what can you do? What action can you take to help yourself be seen around this? Can you write, even if it's writing a letter in your journal about it, writing a letter to the vet, writing an angry letter in your journal, or writing a letter to your vet's office and actually doing that, expressing all of the feelings, but also bringing in, one of the antidotes to working with guilt is really bringing in self-compassion. And that was the piece that I said was going to sound trite, because, like, well, self-compassion. But what guilt is essentially doing is it's beating ourselves up. It's this, sometimes it's a way of trying to find control in a situation where we literally have no control over the situation. And so our critical mind comes in with these guilty thoughts, or these I should have, this beating ourselves up that can become a pattern. And it can become a pattern that people get stuck in for a really long time. And it can really affect the grief journey to a big degree. It can really send people into kind of depressive spirals, is just the guilt alone. So I highly recommend finding support and someone to work with specifically around those pieces. And for folks that are struggling with the images, when a trauma like this happens, our brain can lock onto specific time frames, specific images, and whether it's like the specific images of the last moments in the clinic, or the last moments putting their animal, helping them transition, or maybe because given the scenario, it's that specific image of that final injection, if they were there to see that. And by final, excuse me, I mean the Librela injection. If they were there to witness that, that might stick in the brain. And so for working with trauma and traumatic images, EMDR can be a really beneficial modality. So finding a practitioner that has the tools to support folks through the emotional support pieces, but then also working with the EMDR to help take some of the charge off of those images that might be replaying over and over and over again. And when I'm working with folks that are dealing with the guilt, it can be a really long process to work through that. And I certainly there's a lot of different resources that I have that I like to share with people around how to first recognize what your critical mind is saying, what those thoughts are. So there's starting with observation, and then learning to create a two-way dialogue with that inner voice, learning to speak back to that inner voice, and then giving that inner voice evidence of the opposite. So, and repeating that over time. So, for example, what I would say is, I would bring in the self-compassion by looking at, I did exactly what I thought was in the highest, you know, the highest light of my animal. I did exactly what I had, the best that I could, given the information that I had at the time. I did everything that I could because I love my animal. We would never knowingly, intentionally cause harm to our animals. And, um, and then looking at and that thought's going to keep coming in. And I harmed my animal. I harmed my animal. So then we observe that thought and we go, actually, I did the very best that I could with the information that I had. I did not intentionally harm my animal. I would never intentionally harm my animal. Right. So speaking back to that that track that comes in, that critical thought, and then giving it reasons why and showing reasons why, the evidence why we love our animal. We always did the best we could for our animal. We gave them the best medical attention that we could. We did all, and you build the evidence and you speak back to that critical part of your brain that keeps coming in with that thought. And it becomes over time, it's a way to reprogram the neural pathways that are coming in with those guilty thoughts.
Do you find it
Reprogramming.
help you find it helpful for people to actually write it down?
Yes, writing it down. Yeah. But also having it become a practice, and then having it, if you have it written down, having it all over the house, like on your computer, on your bathroom your bathroom mirror, your fridge, your front door. I did the very best that I could given the information that I had, and repeating that because um, it helps over time. It's not a quick fix by any means, but over time you start to allow and soften and bring in those pieces of self-compassion around, like knowing and trusting that you really had no intention, to harm your animal. And that's true for, folks that have terrible accidents with their animals, or any kind of tragedy, an unexpected tragedy. And that's what this is. It's an unexpected tragedy.
This is a great, tool. Do you have any others that you would share around grieving, mourning, supporting the body, as you're engaged in that process? Anything at all that you would put out there that may be actionable for people to do right away?
Yes. So the first thing to know is that when you go through loss, and even if it's a loss you're expecting, but especially when it's a loss you're not expecting, your body goes through a state of shock and it gets dysregulated. And what that means is that your nervous system, the part of you, your sympathetic nervous system that goes into fight or flight, that you probably have, heard people talk about, this fight, flight, or freeze, gets activated. And we're not fully in our, it gets activated, and we have a difficult time being focused. We tend to be more forgetful. We tend to be clumsier, more accident prone, have a harder time either eating. We get dysregulated in that we're either eating too much or eating too little, or sleeping too much or sleeping too little. Just we're not quite normal. And so slowing down, giving yourself a lot of permission to be where you're at, given this grieving process that's set in and the fact that you're dysregulated. One of the things that I like to do is I have a lot of like easy tools that I give people, because it can help kind of bring you back on track when you're just really feeling lost. And one of them is quite simply putting one hand on your heart and one hand on your stomach and doing some breathing exercises. So quite literally calling yourself back into your body, breathing. And this exercise, the hand on the heart, hand on the stomach, it helps to center you and ground you, and is a nervous system exercise, believe it or not. And so a lot of times too, what I tell early grievers is to take if they had doesn't matter what it looks like, but like a pillow or a stuffed animal, or some folks find it comforting to buy a stuffed animal or have a pillow made in the likeness of their loved one that they've lost, and hold that to their chest and rock with it, or hold a blanket, even if they have their loved one's blanket or jacket or whatever, and hold it to their chest and rock with it and sleep with it, and really allow yourself that tenderness to be with the feelings, to feel all the feelings, and to cry. Giving yourself permission to let the housework go, to let, if you can take bereavement from work, or you can take time off work to just be with yourself and process these big feelings. And we as a society have not been taught how to work with big feelings. We are like terrified of big feelings, and that's really normal. But when we were little, if we had learned that it was okay to feel the big feelings and we were able to feel them to their entirety, we would have learned that every feeling it starts off, it peaks, it crests, and it has its own timeline, and it moves out. So if we're able to sit with these big feelings, every big feeling will move out of your body on its own time. And when we get to the peak, this is where we feel like, oh my God, this is so painful, I can't handle it. But if you just breathe with it and you sit with it and you allow yourself to feel it, it moves out on its own. And through that process, we start to learn how to deal with these big feelings as they come, and face them head on, and really leaning into the grieving process, as opposed to burying our head in work or capping it down and trying not to feel. Because I believe that our feelings get trapped in our bodies if we don't learn how to process them. And I believe that our feelings can cause illnesses in our bodies if we don't allow them to be expressed and released. And so one way to do that is just to simply allow yourself all the big feels, as painful and scary as it is. And again, there are people out there that can support folks through this and walk with them through this. But certainly having, a qualified mental health practitioner to support is really important. One of my number one protocols that I start people with are Epsom salt baths. And I've written a blog on my website as to all of the whys, and also how to support people that have resistance around, I don't want to take a bath, I hate baths, I don't, because that can come up too, or we can tend to procrastinate, not do things that we don't want to do. So I have workarounds for people that I've written this up. But if you start to set a timer on your phone and do 10-minute Epsom salt bath every single night, you will start to notice a subtle impact in how you're feeling. You might feel a tiny bit more resilient. You might sleep better at night. I have had people who have been resistant to it come back to me and go, this is a freaking life changer, and it's the easiest thing I've ever done, right? Or I resisted it for a while, but it's made such a difference in my grief journey. And it really does soften the energetic layers of what's going on for people in their grieving body, but it also helps on a physical level as well. It's a holistic support tool. I have this great oil that I keep here on my desk called parasympathetic. So this is an essential oil that you would sniff or put on your skin. I wouldn't recommend putting this in a diffuser if you have dogs or cats in the house, because I don't know if there's dogs or cats can be allergic to certain essential oils. But anytime I catch myself feeling a little bit like, anxious or a little bit dysregulated, just not my normal grounded self, I just smell this. So this is a tool and it helps to kind of pull me back in to my body. Paying attention to what are the things that you happen to know when you've gone through grief or loss in the past that help you. Often putting our feet in the dirt, feet on the grass outside, sitting in the sun for 10 minutes can help us. It can help shift how we're feeling. For me, drinking water helps shift how I'm feeling. Maybe we're really tired and maybe we need to take a nap. What are the ways, the simple ways in which we can honor our bodies when they're in such a fragile, delicate state? And it really is like this when people are newly grieving, the visual is like we are this delicate little fragile egg that just needs to be put inside a cushion and just like held, right? Do we have people in our lives that can just hold us and allow us to be witnessed and cry? That's such a powerful thing to have if you have that. And if you don't, that's where the pillow exercise comes in really handy too, as well. Um, there's an exercise called havening, which is taking your hands on alternating sides of your arms and squeezing, alternating the squeezes up and down the arms. This exercise releases oxytocin in our body and helps to regulate our nervous system. And when we've lost our animals are one of the main, they really help us release oxytocin through petting them. They help us release dopamine, all of the feel-good hormones we have in our bodies, just having them there with us. So when we lose them, we're also going through quite a physical hormonal withdrawal of not having the feel-good hormones be released. So this is a way to release oxytocin for yourself. That's a really simple way.
Can I ask you a
Yeah,
question? These many wonderful tools that you're sharing, is this workable for not only the bereaved that have lost their pet's transition, but also for people that are trying to provide supportive care and watching their pet suffer and trying to discern what to do? Are these things also ways they can support themselves? Um,
absolutely.
that,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. These tools are life tools. These tools are, they're great in grief or when we're stressed, period. But they're tools that you can use to implement in building a self-care kit for yourself on a day-to-day basis moving forward throughout your life, because we will always have challenges in life. We will always have, weird things come up that make us feel a certain way. And being able to have um, a toolbox where you can pull out these different tools and use them to help you feel more resilient throughout life is essentially what I teach. So they're multi-purpose and they work really, really well when we're in a heightened state and we're grieving or we're stressed.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, this is great information. I'll bring up again, based in my own experience, that probably is around this topic of meaning making. And that is, my dog was on the eve of having his second Librela shot, and something just didn't feel right. And I had prior experience with Facebook helping me with my own medical conditions in the past. So I did a search, and the people specifically that had lost their pets and the brave way that they shared their experience and their information literally saved my dog.
Mm.
Because them sharing their experience, and I'm going to get emotional here, and as painful as that was for them, really helped me then have the information that they didn't have at the time, so I could not get the shot. And so I am just beyond words grateful for the people and the pets that shared their experience. I consider them war heroes. They kind of gave a gift to other owners and other animals. And so I just wanted to share that because sometimes making meaning of an experience, even if it's something we would never repeat, can also offer, um, comfort, I guess. I don't know what your thoughts are on meaning making.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I think that the meaning making process is, one of the later phases of the grief journey is searching for why did this happen? And I think in the very beginning phases where a lot of these people are, this is the time to be angry. And this is the time to be like, this is just unfair and unjust. And I'm pissed. And quite literally rail your fists against, like it's just unfair. And to feel those feelings. And there is a natural piece that ends up being folded in as the journey continues, where the loss starts to be integrated in a different way. And that is a very individual piece. And it's based on what people's worldviews are, what their their worldview on what happens after death, right? Are they a religious person, a spiritual person, or maybe not? And how do they find meaning around the death or the loss? But that piece tends to come later on, and I think that's a beautiful thing that you said, that you see the folks that shared this information and saved perhaps you and perhaps saved other animals from getting this medication is a beautiful way to reframe for them their loss so that they can consider, like, yes, it is tragic and I'm grieving, and at least I helped get the word out, and at least I helped to potentially save other animals.
Right.
Um, with, I'd like to share that, you know, grief is the internalized experience of what we're feeling. And it can often feel very isolating because there is no one else feeling exactly what you're feeling. And mourning is the action that we take in our grieving process. And mourning is what helps us to heal. And so, any action, any small action that you take in your grieving process is helping you to heal. And that action can be telling your story on a Facebook group. That's a mourning action. Yeah, sharing your story. Creating memorial posts, having a memorial, um, sharing the stories of your loved ones. All of those things are actions that we take, right? But you can also look at taking care of yourself in the grieving process as an action in mourning, and taking care of yourself as a way of honoring your animal that loved you and continues to love you through the grieving process. So, yeah, I mean, it's all a matter of, like, you could even say that taking an Epsom salt bath during the grieving process is a way to mourn. It's action that I'm taking in my grieving process, and I can do it on behalf of my loved one who wanted me to be okay, wanted me to be thriving, right?
Yeah, that's really
Um,
beautiful. In some ways, it feels like it gives us permission to do those actions because they're, connected and supportive rather than opposed to or taking away from.
mhm.
Is there anything you think people need to be aware of? You've mentioned several times about reaching out for support for things like EMDR, especially if there's, really upsetting images that are, kind of stuck. Um, is there anything else that you would share with people of when they should really reach out for a higher level of support or care? Any thoughts around that? How someone might tell that, hey, it's time to, really seek out support, whether it be from a therapist or, some other kind of professional, such as yourself.
Absolutely. Sure. I feel like I'm in the camp that believes that we can't do things. It's so much easier to have guidance and support when we're having a challenging time. And even if that's you have a great family support system or a great friend support system, or you have a support system, you feel supported in your grief and loss. If you feel isolated, because pet loss in general is considered a disenfranchised grief, which means that it's not broadly accepted by the majority population as equal to a human loss. If you feel, which we understand that it is, and often even times more profoundly painful and devastating than a human loss, right? If you feel isolated, if you have no one to talk to, if you need support, you'll know it. If you're struggling to get through your days, people find me and they're like, I'm not functional. I'm just not functioning and I don't know what to do. I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, or I'm whatever. They're in a dysregulated state and they need support through that. So if you're watching this and that's like, oh, that's me, I need support, you can feel free to reach out. And there are pet loss support groups around the country. There are virtual pet loss support groups too. That's definitely a place where you will be seen and you will be heard. But don't let it get to the point where you you need to be hospitalized, or don't get to the point where you are feel so lost that you can't function at all. I think that reaching out and finding someone who really understands how important our animals are to us is really important, really important. And there are more and more therapists and professionals who specialize in not just grief, but specialize in specifically pet loss available, that work remotely across the United States and across the world. So there are professionals available to help. There are also, if you're a DIYer, there are great books on pet loss. And I can email you some of those references if you wanted to include those.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I feel moved to bring up a topic that may be provocative, and I think this is the last thing, but I just want to bring it up. I know that suicide rates are very high in the vet community. And I know that those of us that have experienced our animal being injured in this way and have not felt like we've gotten the support that we needed or wanted from many veterinarians, that it's easy, to sort of target that community with anger. And it sounds like you're saying that that may be very appropriate and healthy to a certain degree. I guess I also want to recognize, as I look at this knowledge gap, that it seems like the vets are potentially also having their own experience. I don't doubt that the large population of vets love animals and would never do anything to harm an animal, and are going by information that they got from the pharmaceutical rep. And so this is a really complicated situation. And I just want to acknowledge that because of my awareness of vets already being in some ways a vulnerable population and struggling. So I just wanted to include them, and an awareness of the potential grief and further complications that they have of having a lot of anger directed towards them.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, they may be in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
in this situation. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, see if you had anything to share, around that topic.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Vets are people too. And they're doing the very best that they can given the information that they have. And it is a flag of a larger problem, right? And who is really at the end of that problem? Where is the gap in the education coming from? And Um, yeah, I think that, vets also need their own support for processing these things. It's very difficult. They do a lot of having to give difficult diagnoses to people, and they see a lot of difficult things, and they do love animals. Um, I've done on my end, I posted about this topic on my small Instagram following. And I emailed and contacted the vets that are in my circle to let them know what's been going on. And I have not gotten responses.
Mm.
Um, and so, and I'm someone who works within the veterinary industry, saying this is what's come to light, right? After you initially contacted me, I said this is, and then I looked up, there's the change.org, the call, the petitions to have these medications recalled. Um, and I sent that information along to the vets that I know in my circle, and I didn't hear anything back. So I did have one vet who's been a colleague of mine for a while contact or respond, make a comment on my post that she has not seen any negative impact from this medication in her clinic, but she absolutely has, she said her heart goes out to the families that are having results like this, and, situations like this arise. And then I had another colleague reach out to me who contacted her vet, and she said that her vet had already seen a concern come up and is like, I'm not using that medication anymore, right? So it's going to be a the information is going to start coming in. This is the first year this medication was released. The information is going to start coming in, and something is going to have to shift. But
Like you had said, that gap in,
yeah,
and it is just a really painful place to be.
yeah,
And I guess counter, right? I have the compassion towards the vets, and then I also have my own anger and frustration is, as I became more educated about this, I was shocked to hear that, this drug was first tested on humans, and it was stopped in phase 3 because of the damage it was doing to human bodies and joints. And then it was directed towards animals, and animal pharmaceuticals don't go through 3 phases of clinical trials. They only go through 2 phases. And there was a very short trial. One of them didn't have a control group. And so really and truly in a pharmaceutical that's released to animals, their first several years of being released is like a third of phase 3 clinical trial in humans, where it's opened up to a larger population for a longer period of time. And so I guess I would just hope that vets develop a healthy skepticism of understanding that about their profession, that, these drugs, this is the first time it's being opened up. And so being willing to hear what people are observing and trust pet owners that can manage both their own feelings and grief, as well as objectively report what they're observing in their pet. They're an important piece of reporting. They're with their pet. They see their pet more than anyone else. And so I'm hoping that we move in that direction, where there's kind of a more partnership and an awareness of, this grassroots information, and the pet owner's experience and observations are a really important piece. And again, that there's skepticism of, I see this research, I hear what the farmer rep is saying, and I'm going to temper it and add it to what I'm also getting from the field, and using all of those sources of information as valuable inputs. Um, that's kind of my desire, or I think
mhm.
everyone's desire. And, and I can hold both compassion and frustration.
Yes.
I've got 2 hands, so
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that was really well said.
thanks. Well, any final thoughts before we say goodbye that you want to share?
Um, final thoughts, if anybody feels called, if you feel like linking them to or putting my website information, if anybody feels called to reach out for support, or even just look at my website where I have resources. I actually have a PDF on my website of all the grief books that I like to recommend to people, including my clients and other professionals. I have um, just different resources available, including like my blog on uh, that has different articles on the Epsom salt baths, on creating a toolkit for self-care, on working with depression, on rituals, on affirmations and different things. So I'm hoping that people will find that as a resource. And, if anyone wants to reach out directly, I welcome that. I offer everyone a complimentary 20-minute call with me face to face on Zoom like this. So I can at least maybe help get you to the right place or get you to whatever resources you need. And just that my heart goes out to all of these families that are suffering from adverse effects of Librela and Solensia. And yeah, that I think that getting the word out and having conversations like we're having now it's really important for the benefit of the animals and the pet parents. To hopefully, the more that we keep the conversation going, the more we can hopefully help save other animals as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, emphasize how generous I've found you, and just sharing your time and all the resources that you have, accessible to people on your website. So thank you for that. It's really special work that you're doing, and it's really beautiful of how generous you are with sharing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.